I just another video on the state superstructure. It's coming to a point now where people are seeing through the state, but of course the army will remain. So when the state knows it's been seen through, it'll probably just not bother saying anything. I'm not saying it'll say something that is totally untrue, like you all still think of us like you used to, or whatever. They just probably won't say anything. Just continue to exist. Might or might not lie. It's a bit like, we know Australia exists, so it doesn't really matter what they say once everyone's seen through the propaganda state superstructure. Once everyone's seen through that propaganda, it doesn't matter if they say Australia exists or doesn't exist, that sort of thing. Because we know Australia exists, so we know the state superstructure is a propaganda matrix. But because it's still got the army, it'll still continue to exist. They'll know that. That's why they won't need to really say much. Because we can see through the propaganda matrix, but we can't just, take down the state because it's backed up by the army. Which is really twatty, isn't it? When you think about it. It's really, really twatty. Something's got to give. We don't want to live in this world where all the power is all concentrated there with this news media clique that everyone sees through, especially the papers. There's divide and rule, emissions propaganda, whereby they don't ever quote people who are in the public eye who speak a bit like I am here. Don't ever discuss that. Doesn't exist. It's the same logic, right? As where all the stuff go on about how the state has the news media backing it up, and it has the megaphones with the news media, and we have no power. Well, you never get that said in the news media, and that's in the same way that newspapers who are losing readership never go on about that and cut their figures, but when they were doing well in the 70s and 80s, they got it on the front page, not as the main headline, but above the main headline, crystal clear. Report that, but we don't ever, we admit all this other ton of stuff, including, their own decline. And it's just the same. I mean, the Sun newspaper used to be the number one on doing that. You go on. Now they've even banned information about their readership figures. I wonder why. That's cancelled. No. So, I mean, I think that's a bit of a foolish one on their part. A lot of the propaganda stuff, right, as immoral as it is, you can see the logic to it. It's immoral, it's wrong, but you can see the logic. But on that Sun one of cancelling, I don't think that's a good idea for them, even from an immoral perspective, for them, a selfish perspective. Because people then just assume that the figures are atrocious. And we probably go a bit too far, you know what I mean? Whereas if they just told the truth, well then, I just think that one's a bit sloppy, a bit silly. I mean, you haven't got an army of people out there who are checking out the Sun newspaper's figures, so they could just give it quietly, and some people would notice, but not many. But by making a story about how you don't go on and give the figures, I mean, it's pretty obvious why not. It doesn't work because we think the worst. Or most people think the worst. Now, that's their problem. And I hope that they're soon out of business. Now, we've reached a point where we need a solution to this. We're a bit like the bloody UFO community, where always big things come in and nothing ever does. Oh, there's something comes along that implies that the big thing, the disclosure, is going to happen, but it never does. Now we're getting a bit like that in the sense that the trends are going our way all the time, but the revolution never happens. That's the equivalent of the UFO community's disclosure. It's so annoying. I mean, we can get there, but it requires. There's another point here I want to make. I don't just want any revolution. Obviously, I don't want a far-right revolution. I don't just want any left-wing revolution either. I mean, mine is about. I often use that word megaphones. It's not a word I would use if I was at university writing an essay, because it's just I think it's a good word to use to get across the message. But it's just, I don't want to bother saying what academic words would maybe be used because it's irrelevant. But the decentralisation of, to get away from the megaphones, so that we've all got, so that the power and control is taken away from the elites, because they can reach millions of people. They've got Downing Street, they've got Parliament, they've got the army, so all of that. Now we need to get decentralised power to the individual, yeah? Right, so I don't just want decentralisation to bureaucracies at a local level. I want it to go all the way to the individual, so that the power, you see, would still not be quite as far as we want it to be if it was only sent to the regions. I mean, it would maybe stop some of the more obvious corruption at the top and the sex crimes in Parliament. And obviously not all of them are committing sex crimes, but power does corrupt, and it does make people tend to do just whatever the hell they like. But I want to get all. So, for example, we don't want to decentralise to the regional level and still have some of the same problems. We want to get all the way at the individual level, so that they're empowered with a voice and they're empowered with income, and so that there's peace. Now that one would be sorted out if we took power to wage war away from the centralised superstate. So it's possible to make progress, but we need to go the whole way, not just forever playing timid games. So this decentralisation, it makes me wonder if it's going to be a techie answer, because I can't see the outer world doing it, and I'm sick of this process whereby we're making progress. The state superstructure has clearly been seen through by so many people, but still nothing gives. And like I say, we're in that same position as the UFO community. Now in the UFO community you might say are talking bollocks and there's no disclosure to be had. Maybe that's true, but there is a revolution to be had outside of that stuff, away from, imagine UFOs didn't exist at all. Let's just get rid of that now. Forever if you want. Rid of that. There's all this stuff about power and control that does need to be sorted out. That is a total disgrace. Now, if I had to set up a system that was a power and control propaganda system, I'll give exactly this. Exactly what we've got here. I was writing about that a bit earlier, so I'm just going to quote myself. I'll just get writing. This is some notes I scribbled just earlier. Control the money and news media, then you largely control the people. The decentralisation of characteristic of the internet is challenging that. but the state still continues on. Then I underline the following. If I had to invent a power and control propagandist state from scratch, I would invent exactly what we experience now. End of underlining. And then I put vast inequality of power and income, emission of alternative viewpoints in the news media, 24/7 repetition from the megaphones, illusion of equal voice, character assassination of the tiny fraction of powerful voices that do subscribe to alternative views, all backed up by the violent force of the army as last resort if the people were to see through the fake democracy. Right, so yeah, we have the propaganda state that you would invent if we didn't have it. We've got to get over this. Seeing through is one thing. Getting what we see through. I mean, the people in the state superstructure, right? That would be affected by everyone seeing through it. They're not taken out in the streets and decapitated. They still get to live a cushy, comfortable life. I always think there's no lose on this. It's it's win-win. It's not this makes me think that the figures that get a kick out of this do so because they've got huge egos. And that's what it is. Huge egos. They want excessive power. This has got to end. That's the end of this video.